Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian, and today I would like to welcome you to our glorious science fiction future. I came to work today in a flying car, I have a jetpack at home, and of course, I am armed with a rocket rifle. Okay, I don't actually have a flying car, and the much promised jetpacks have not yet arrived, but this is actually a rocket rifle. Well, I'm here at the Rock Island auction house. This is one of the guns that's coming up for sale in their September of 2015 premiere auction. And you know, these are pretty rare, and I thought it'd be very cool to take a look at one. This is quite literally a Gyrojet rocket carbine. It says so right here on top of the receiver. This was manufactured by a company called MB Associates. They were founded in 1960, and they're a partnership between two guys, Bob Mainhart and Art Beal, hence MB Associates. They initially started with this idea of a small handheld rocket flare launcher, and it kind of evolved over the course of a couple years into this whole wide array of rocket firearms. They apparently had plans for something like 50 plus different variations on the concept. Now, the one that was most produced in the greatest numbers was their standard handgun, but they did also make a couple of different types of prototype carbines, and this is one of them. Actually, they made several hundred of these carbines. So the basic idea of the Gyrojet is that you have a projectile which is actually in some ways harkens back to the early volition repeaters and volcanics, where the body of the projectile actually houses all of its own fuel. Except instead of gunpowder, in this case, it was a proprietary rocket fuel with a little impact-sensitive primer on the back and 4 jet vents on the back of the projectile. Now, instead of just pointing straight backward, the vents for this rocket actually were all angled slightly so that they would cause the projectile to spin. So the mechanism on the carbines is identical to that of the handguns. And I actually did a video here a little while back on one of the Gyrojet handguns. So if you haven't seen that, that's probably a good one to check out for some background information. Now, where the rifles or the carbines differ is that they had much longer barrels. This is an 18-inch barrel on this thing. In theory, that would actually take care of some of the major problems with the Gyrojet pistols. The big one was in a pistol-length barrel, the projectile is moving extremely slowly when it actually leaves the barrel. Because this is a rocket, it's accelerating over the first approximately 20 or 30 yards of travel. So at the very beginning, it hasn't built up any speed, and the problem in the handgun is that because it's so slow, any amount of wind will have a pretty dramatic effect on its trajectory right at the muzzle. Well, if we go from a 5 or 6 inch barrel out to an 18-inch barrel, that projectile is moving quite a bit faster when it leaves this muzzle, and that would lessen the impact of wind. However, it would at the same time mean that you would have to have extremely good follow-through when you're shooting in order to get any accuracy. This would, I would say from a shooting perspective, this would be kind of akin to shooting a flintlock, where there is a significant delay between when you pull the trigger and when the bullet actually leaves the muzzle. All right, to be really specific, this is a Mark I Model B Gyrojet rocket carbine. And that means it was made before 1968. As you can see, it uses a 13mm projectile. In 1968, the National Firearms Act passed, and that redefined anything over 50 caliber, which is 12.7mm, as being a destructive device. Now, the Gyrojets had all been made in 13mm, which would, from 1968 on, be considered illegal. So they changed from the Mark I to the Mark II and reduced the caliber from 13mm to 12 to avoid the guns being NFA-regulated items. Now, the ATF has exempted all of the original pre-1968 Mark I guns in 13mm, so those have been specifically exempted. They are not NFA weapons, so this can be transferred just like any other firearm. It's also a Model B. There was also a Model A carbine, which was basically a pistol in kind of a carbine chassis. The Model B here is much more of a sporter style of gun. It is mechanically identical, and I'm sure many of the parts interchange, but it's got this much nicer looking stock. It doesn't have any iron sights. This rail is standard original equipment. It's got this nice bell at the muzzle, which doesn't actually do anything, but it looks neat. Control-wise, there are only 3 things to really worry about. We have the trigger, obviously. This is the hammer, the cocking lever, and then this, I believe, is supposed to be the safety, but on this one, all it does is serve to lock the loading gate. So the way these function is actually rather unusual. The cartridges, let me unload that. So one last control. We have a spring-loaded stop for the gate here. Cartridges fit in this integral magazine. It holds 6 rounds. You load 6 in there. There are no feed lips, so once you're loaded, you go ahead and close that top cover to hold them in place. And then when you fire the gun, the hammer actually slides forward and hits the nose of the cartridge, forcing it backwards onto a firing pin, which then detonates it. And then as the rocket starts to burn, the first thing it has to do is recock the hammer. So that's the fired position. And then as the rocket starts to travel, it pushes the hammer down and recocks it, making it ready for a follow-up shot. Really, actually pretty simple. Like I said, that's exactly the same in the handgun version as it is in this carbine. So in total, at least a couple hundred of these were made. I've seen serial numbers up into the mid 200s. This is number 86. But they are definitely less common to find than the handguns. I think this would have been a more practical application for the gyrojet concept, but clearly the handguns were their major focus at first, and when the handguns failed to be popular enough, for many reasons, to sustain the business, they simply didn't have enough cash flow to try and exploit other ideas like the carbine. So by 1970, MB Associates was out of business. A total of about 10 years from original concept to trying the guns to going out of business and failing. Well, thanks for watching, guys. If you've watched too many hours of the Jetsons and you would really like to go live in the future, I think this is about as close as you can get to a lot of the typical sci-fi elements in life. You know, who doesn't need a rocket gun, really? At any rate, if you check the link in the text below, that'll take you to Rock Island's catalog page where you can take a closer look at this rocket carbine and its description. And if you just can't live without it, create an account, place a bid online, or come down here in person to participate in the auction. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.